Welcome to First Alarm Family First. I'm Jen Herrera alongside Carolyn Acosta. This is episode 40. Hard to believe that it has been 40 episodes. 10 months ago, who would have thought?
I know. Time has flown. It definitely has. It's going to be a year or two. So the day that Alex passed. So we're very happy that this has come along and has gone so far.
Yeah, we've had an amazing amount of support from so many of you in our community, so thank you for that. We are constantly doing things. We are constantly working to make change. We have been able to raise more money than we ever thought we would be able to in such a short amount of time, so thank you for all of those who have helped. And we want to tell you quickly before we bring in our guest today about our next event taking place this month.
We have the Bleeding Blue Mental Health Conference that they'll be dedicating to Alex. It's July 19th. Please join us at Miami-Dade North Campus. We'd love to see all of you there.
Yeah, and we are taking a big role in that as far as getting more people there and getting the seats filled and, of course, spreading the word when it comes to mental health, all in honor of Alex. All right, let's bring in our guests.
Yes, today we are honored to sit down with Commissioner Danielle Cohen-Higgins, who represents Miami-Dade County District 8 from growing up in South Dade and leading powerful committees in infrastructure, public safety, and resilience, not to mention founding her own law firm. Commissioner Cohen-Higgins brings both heart and hustle to the work of local leadership. In this conversation today, we'll be diving into how she's supporting first responders, her vision for mental health awareness, and what she's learning from the front lines of public service. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you for being here. So mental health is a big topic right now, especially for our first responders. Have you had any personal conversations or moments that really opened your eyes as to what they go through?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. You know, as a public servant, that's what we are. We're elected officials or politicians. My favorite title that I like to refer to is public servant because that's what we are, and we can never lose sight of that. We get insight and opportunities to be places that sometimes our residents don't have access to. And so what I mean is, when I came into office in 2020, it was at the height of the pandemic. And then shortly thereafter was the absolutely horrific collapse of Champlain Towers. And I bring up both of those extraordinarily challenging times for our community because it was during those two particular time frames that I built a greater appreciation for our first responders, because never before had I seen such angst, anxiousness. I'm going to be careful to say this because I'm not a medical professional. I'm not diagnosing, but I saw authentic depression in some of the eyes of the professionals that I would see day in and day out, smiling, laughing, having a great time, but Champlain Towers and these men and women literally digging out bodies from concrete rubble. And I was there every day bringing cookies, bringing water. At that point, there was so little that I could do as a public servant. But I said to my team, just being there to bring, and when I say I meant bring, it was to our firefighters and it was to our law enforcement professionals that were there sometimes 24/7 doing their role as public servants. And I said, whatever we could do, even if it brings the slightest smile to their face, we're going to do, because again, I saw this level of weight that these events changed their lives, right? And so I'm not a first responder, but from those events, it became very clear to me that I, as a public servant, needed to do more to make sure that we're not just honoring these professionals and trying to bring their daily perspective to the forefront. And by daily perspective, I mean, you lived it as a wife. I'm sure you heard your husband come home and tell you stories of things that you couldn't even imagine. So that our community could appreciate the work that they do and understand that these professionals every single day are facing us on our worst day. That's their every day. Our worst day, our most horrific tragedy, our most awful nightmare where we find ourselves having to dial 911 is there every single day. Right. So the weight that we carry, think about the last time you dialed 911, that is a horrific moment in your life. they're living that every single day. So I can't imagine the weight and the trauma that they carry. But I said to myself, the least I could do is honor them and recognize them by way of showing community support, recognizing their service and their sacrifice. And so 4 years ago, thankfully, with the support of my colleagues, we created the Hometown Heroes event here in Miami-Dade County.
Yes.
And it's really just an opportunity to showcase our local heroes and allow the narrative to change for our young people, like your beautiful son who's here with us this morning, and allow them to have a different perspective rather than what the national media showcases about our first responders and what Hollywood showcases about who our heroes truly are, right? And so thankfully, we've done that event 4 years now. We'll do it again this October 18th at Tropical Park. And again, long-winded answer, but really supporting our first responders is something that is meaningful to me and very important to me in my role as a public servant. And the support that I've given will only grow as I continue in this capacity.
Yeah, the gist of that answer, though, you nailed it on the head, Commissioner, because it's like we are in that moment, like what can we do? Both of us spouses of first responders, right? We think we know, but sometimes civilians, sometimes public servants, I like how you put that, don't necessarily know. I want to ask you this because of that, because sometimes even those of us who are so close to it feel that our hands are tied. We know that Governor Ron DeSantis recently signed legislation when it comes to more support for first responders, talking about the equipment, the chemicals, the toxins that they carry, letting first responders be aware, right, that that's a thing, which I believe most of them do at this point. When it comes to mental health with this legislation, he acknowledged that there are concerns, there are suicide risks, creating more of a platform for some of the risks involving mental health. What does that mean? Right? You know, as much as that's great to hear from the governor, and we're glad that it's being highlighted, especially with the work that we've been doing for the past year, what exactly does that mean as far as something being implemented, and how far away do you think we are from something actually being implemented, something hands-on?
Yeah, that is a really great question. And, you know, it's unfortunate. And this is a criticism because I think it's important that we criticize ourselves as public servants. It takes a very long time, sadly, to move things through the legislative process and get it to a place where our residents, such as yourself, are feeling and living the impact of that legislation. So, you know, when he makes comments about passing, and I'm not sure specifically the bill that you're referring to, but I'm assuming it's legislation or financial support in a bill that just came down during this legislative session. It's wonderful that he's highlighting the mental health aspect, which is something that is not as recognized as it needs to be. But what that means by way of time frame and actual tangible results is something I'm going to have to get back to you on, just because I don't know the specific bill.
Right.
But it is always a very good sign when elected officials and public servants at the highest level are bringing light to an issue. Sometimes just having their voice connect to an issue is an amazing starting point. So that's wonderful. And to the extent that you and your organization, Bleeding Blue, is a wonderful organization. We partnered with them at last year's Hometown Heroes. We hope to see them again this year. The work they're doing is fantastic. And if everyone is planning to go to their conference on July, is it 19th? 19th. I hope everyone will consider going. They're doing really important work. But by the time that is seen in our local communities, I don't know the answer, but don't stop beating the drum.
That's what that was more of the question. Door. What can we do as civilians? Because who knows, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know if you go to Tallahassee during session to do lobbying. You don't have to be a formal lobbyist. You could just be a concerned citizen, take a trip to Tallahassee. I believe that Bleeding Blue does. I'm not sure, but there should be a coalition building. What you're doing now is amazing. Start knocking on doors of lawmakers. Start going to Tallahassee. Start coming to the commission, having conversations with me. Like, what more can we do so that we start answering to you? That's our job as public servants, right? How can we do more? An event at Tropical Park once a year is amazing, but what can we do by way of legislation to codify and protect our first responders with the mental health issues that we know that they're all suffering? Not that they're all suffering from, but they all are susceptible to suffer from. Yeah.
So in your role, you obviously juggle a lot of priorities. You know, you do the transportation, affordability, safety. How do you make sure mental health doesn't get lost in the mix?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you know, I should have said this from the outset of our conversation, but please accept my deepest condolences for the loss of your husband. A year is no time at all. It's still very raw. And I know you're walking around with half of a heart is what I can only imagine. So please accept my condolences. You know, I, as one of 13 commissioners, am happy to have conversations with our mayor and bring forth legislation that you think would be helpful to supporting our first responders, right? We are lawmakers at the local level. A number of people don't understand what we do as commissioners. What does a commissioner do? We are your local congresswoman or congressman. We are your local state representative or state senator, in that the 13 of us write the laws locally here and pass a budget locally here. And because Miami-Dade County is such a large county, to place it into perspective, our $13 billion budget is larger than, don't quote me on the precise numbers, 7 or 8 states in the United States, right? So in the United States, it's a lot that we can do, even though it's at a local level, just because our community is 3 million and our budget is so large. So if you have ideas, and you would be the best people, you're the advocates, you live this, you're very plugged into this community. And I've had this conversation with Bleeding Blue as well. If there is a specific program that you think needs funding, if there's a specific program that you think needs to be not just piloted, but become policy, let me know. I would be happy to carry that sort of legislation on this issue, because, you know, again, I don't need to lose a husband in order to understand its importance. I don't need to wait until it happens to a family member for me to kind of kick into action. So any specific ideas that you have, I'm very open to them. I'm open to them.
I'm curious, as somebody who has grown up in this community, obviously Miami-Dade Fire Rescue specifically is very close to us, because that's where our husbands spent their careers. Do you recall a personal incident, Commissioner, where you had to rely on firefighters, or even a career day, right? We all have those memories from when we were kids where a firefighter impacted us in one way or another, or even a police officer, any first responder.
Yeah, it's such a great question that you ask, because this is a story that I share not often, but it's a very personal story. And you know, my family's Jamaican. We're from the Caribbean. I was born here in Miami. But after I was born, we went back to Jamaica and lived there for a short period of time. And if you're familiar with Jamaica, it's very different than Miami, especially then in the 80s. And we had a house in the mountains. Why am I telling you this? Because when you dial 911, the way that my mom dialed 911 when I was a kid living in the mountains of Jamaica, it is a very different experience. Right. When we dial 911 here, we can safely anticipate and safely assume that a law enforcement officer or first responder will be there 5 minutes max. Okay, and 5 minutes is the response time that we would find unacceptable. In the mountains of Jamaica, it is much longer period than that. And I share the story of being at home, and there was a home invasion that was happening. And my mother and I are, you know, cowered in the corner, terrified, seeing literally someone in the house. And it was my father and the weapons that he had in the home that he utilized to be our first responder, to be our police officer. Our family was the protector of our family at that time, because in the mountains of Jamaica, you just had too long of a time to wait for law enforcement to arrive. So I will never forget that memory and that fear of just waiting, not knowing what is going to happen as a result of this strange criminal trying to come into our home. And so I never take for granted not only response times, but the way that our country is set up so that we can have our law enforcement and our first responder professionals arrive as quickly as they do. But that is always the story that I share that had me have a connection very early on.
An appreciation.
And an appreciation. And even before going into office, my children, 12 and 5, whenever we see a law enforcement professional or a military personnel or a firefighter, I have them go over to that person and tell them thank you and just shake their hand to show respect from such a young age, just so that they have, again, an appreciation. So for me, this is a value proposition. It's an experience, again, that I had as a child, just saying, you know, how terrified I was, and coming to this country to live and saying, thank God that it's completely different here. And we can't say thank you enough to these professionals.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
It's my
Yes,
pleasure.
We appreciate it. I truly appreciate you kind of breaking it down and letting us know as civilians what we can do and being very honest about the steps and how things work and how the process works. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yes,
my pleasure.
yes.
Thank you so much for having me. And, you know, in October, we'll do Hometown Heroes at Tropical Park. Hopefully I can maybe come back on to do my little pitch about trying to get everybody and get everyone out there. But I really appreciate the work that you're doing on this area of mental health. Keep plugging along and consider me an ally in your effort, and do not hesitate to call if there's any specific pieces of legislation that you'd like for me to carry on your behalf.
Thank you, Commissioner. Really
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
We want to remind everybody, as always, if you see something, if you hear something, if somebody reaches out to you, to make sure you sound the alarm.
Save a life.
We'll see you next time.
Take care.